I see folks are trickling in, so thank you. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome you all to Bright Spots, Schools and Organizations Cultivating Black Youth Excellence in Los Angeles. This is the third iteration of a research study which really helped to launch the work of our center. And we are very pleased this afternoon to be joined by community partners and representatives from some of our exemplar schools for this webinar, and as well to hear more about the research report itself. I just want to thank you all for making time in your day and for the work that you are all doing. I know folks are still filtering in, but we only have an hour. So I really want to move forward and have us hear about the research itself. This is foundational work for us and very close to our hearts. We at the Center for Transformation of Schools often find that the focus may rest on, the equity gaps and the problems and the troubles. Less prevalent is a focus really on folks doing what they need to do, folks that are doing a great job. And this report, I think, does that important work and thereby kind of shines a light for us to forge a way forward for Black students in Los Angeles County, as well as the state and the nation, for that matter. We are going to be welcoming not only researchers, but as I mentioned, representatives from Los Angeles County Office of Education, and as well, important community organizations like Community Coalition here in Los Angeles County, and Baldwin Hills Elementary School. We hope to have an hour filled with information, but also a chance for more of a conversation. And so we will kind of close with a panel discussion where we'll offer the opportunity for any questions that you may have in order that we can just enter more of a conversation at that point. So with that, I would like to introduce the primary author of the report itself and the guiding light of the research, Dr. Travis Dumas.
Thank you, Dr. James, for that warm introduction. I appreciate the description as a guiding light, but I would like to reemphasize that this work could not have been done without my amazing colleagues here at CTS. So again, hello, everyone. On behalf of the CTS team, I would like to thank you all for joining us today and this afternoon as we share and discuss some of these important works and topics. Like Dr. James has said, my name is Travis Dumas. I am a research analyst here at CTS, and I've had the privilege of working closely with our Bright Spots project. However, before I was an analyst at CTS, and before I was a doctoral student and graduate student at UCLA, I, like the many Black students featured in this study, was a Black student navigating public schools within Los Angeles. Even to the extent of sharing some of the exact seats, some of our participants being a proud alum of King Drew High School. And within my doctoral studies, having completed a dissertation that examined high-performing Black male students attending low-performing high schools, I was eager to join this team and project in particular, as it aligned thematically and goal-wise with so much of my previous research. So with that being said, this particular project holds a special significance to me because it again, I stand here or sit here and join you all as proof of the effectiveness of the kinds of practices and cares and cultures of excellence we've been able to expand upon within our Bright Spots report. And we do this work not to leverage it or discuss it in a way that diminishes or invalidates the experiences of schools, Black students, and educators who have been beset by persisting and now we're seeing emerging challenges, but invites and uplift the instances and patterns of Black student excellence that are just too substantial to not be adequately accounted for within the discourse surrounding Black students. And so that's what we're hoping to do here today. And allowing our bright spots, allowing our promising models, allowing our educators who have been so effective in supporting these vulnerable students to be the learning tools that they essentially can as we continue to theorize and strive for equitable systems of education. As we transition, I also want to remark that this particular work, like Dr. James has shared, is the third iteration of our Bright Spots report. You know, the initial report was released in October of 2019, and the fruits of that research team we are still able to benefit from. And so I would be completely remiss if I didn't take a second to just really acknowledge the folks who have helped propel not only this particular project, but again, the initial iterations of the Beyond the Schoolhouse report, including Dr. Stanley Johnson, including Dr. Angela James, my wonderful, wonderful supervisor who just makes working with CTS just an amazing experience. Dr. Joseph Bishop, my former cohort mates, Dr. Travell Lyons, now Dr. Earl Edwards, my former Kingsville alum himself, DeMonte Thompson, Gene McAdoo, Edward Riviera, Jalil Howard, our communications coordinator, Geneva Sun, the students and educators whose narratives, wisdoms, and insights are the centerpiece of our Bright Spots report. And of course, our fearless leader and center head, Dr. Tyrone Howard. He made me promise to mention him last. But we truly appreciate the support and contributions. And with that being said, I would like to move us into some of the discussions of our major findings from the report. I think it's the next slide. Yes. All right, thank you all. So we began today by addressing some of our, we began by addressing our key findings. The first being the effectiveness of holistic supports for students. In speaking with both our students and educators, right, we found a direct acknowledgement of how schools and organizations manage to tend to the academic, non-academic, and socio-emotional needs of students. As Black youth, as Black young folks navigating the social political terrain that is Los Angeles, we understand that several structural conditions tend to follow our students within the classrooms, right? They aren't able to leave the outside world or things that are impacting them as folks within this area or divorce that from their schooling experiences. As such, we found it important to uplift how at our feature sites, our educators, our community partners, our teachers are able to meet our students with responsive care and curriculum and cultures of care that are tailored, that include tailored classroom curriculum and content, as well as wellness practices and affirmations of students' abilities and belonging within their particular learning spaces. Next, we uplift the fact that our Bright Spots and Promising Models employ a culturally relevant teaching and engagement strategies, right? Where students are able to discuss, typically we see culturally relevant teaching and engagement strategies discussed in this somewhat nebulous manner that kind of oversimplifies the practice to creative ways of teaching, when really we understand that we found that at our schools, to most optimally serve Black students, our sites are actively resisting this overly Eurocentric teaching curriculum that so many learning spaces tend to default to, and instead are employing curriculum, are employing materials, are employing classroom lessons that are reflective of their students, representative of their students, their experiences in their worlds, right? And how this is actually used as a tool to bolster not only engagement with material, but content of school material and lessons. And so related to a culturally relevant based approach to teaching and engagement, we have learning as a tool of empowerment. Perhaps most salient with our community organizations, such as COCO, such as the Social Justice Learning Institute, SJLI, we found that with our community organizations and within our schools, the impact of allowing classroom lessons to also serve as spaces for students to cultivate a critical consciousness, as well as develop some of these practices that service their participation within civil manners, right? So allowing some of these discussions that revolve around literacy and language are some of the barriers that may impact them, allow students to write these things into their engagement with their communities around them. So in understanding that within their learning spaces, within their classroom spaces, they are encouraged to take these practices beyond the classroom and employ them within their civic engagements as well, within their communities, within their learning communities that may take place even outside of the classroom. And so again, bolstering the agency and the empowerment that students feel, and really allowing this comprehensive learning and developmental experience that the benefits just can't be overstated when it comes to speaking about Black students in particular, right? And lastly, we have the co-construction of learning spaces and opportunities, particularly that there is a wealth of benefits afforded to students when allowed to actively engage in their learning spaces and being able to practice the skill set that they have inherent knowledge that they have, and being able to, as well as being able to incorporate that and exercise these things in tandem with the skill sets and knowledge they have acquisition within the classroom space, within the formal learning spaces, but allowing students to really participate in this somewhat lateral as opposed to this horizontal, as opposed to this strictly vertical learning dynamic. And again, allowing them to feel the freedom and agency, and relating back to our previous finding, the empowerment that comes with being able to actively co-construct learning opportunities with their educators. And from our findings, we were able to develop 4 major practice and policy recommendations. So I'm going to ask that we move on to the next slide. Thank you. Again, speaking right back to the importance of increasing participatory learning opportunities for students, allowing them the chance to construct and have a hand on the wheel when it comes to really creating responsive learning spaces, understanding that student input really allows us as educators and those intended to support Black students to understand what are the needs that need to be met, and really having invite for the folks who are experiencing these learning experiences, these learning spaces, giving them a chance to uplift and be validated in the fact that as Black folks experience in schools, they are probably the most well-positioned to evaluate and appraise their experiences and what is effective and what is not. And so having that as a tool being incorporated in our practices and the opportunities of learning we construct for students really allows for these optimal learning spaces is what we're getting to. Secondly, again, developing and employing a culturally responsive culture of care, and knowing that as young Black folks, as students, understanding that students need different things at different times. And so being able to tailor care and being able to tailor responses to the presenting needs of students requires a particular ear and requires a particular flexibility, knowledge, and competency if we really want to support students adequately. Next, we understand that even speaking directly with our community organizations, that our communities, the people in them, are such a wealth and an asset, and that these partnerships, right, between communities, between community members and community organizations really serve to bolster and forward so many of the missions of schools. And so when we have a chance to construct optimal, when we have a chance to construct really complementary relationships between community partnerships in our schools, we again are able to bolster the impact and effectiveness of our teaching in the ways that we are able to support our students, particularly vulnerable students, particularly Black students. And then again, speaking to supporting students, we cannot forget the ways that we need to support teachers, particularly those who are serving marginalized students, and understanding that we need to allow teachers the space to make the necessary pivots needed to support their students and meet their needs, academic, non-academic, and otherwise adequately. That teachers should be able to do so without bureaucratic interference or policy interferences or policy barriers, instead uplifting the expertise of our teachers rather than deprofessionalizing them and trusting that they have a sense of their classroom pulse. And so I'd like to transition into like my final remarks around how, although our bright spots highlight effective practices of support, they also function as critiques and shine and bring attention to some of the critiques and some of the conditions entirely too common in the experiences of Black students. Too often, this excellence is an exception to the rule and not a norm, right? And thinking about how a phenomenal teacher who is adequately supported by the administration, while this is deserving of praise, it should not be an anomaly. Rather, it should be something that is normalized and something that is incorporated into our practices. When we think about the ways that our bright spots are able to simultaneously manage rigor and support of students, we need to understand that rigor and proper support of students should not be in contention with each other. Rather, they should be balanced elements within our practices of supporting students. And so we understand that across districts, and going back to Dr. James's earlier comments about this overemphasizing of the challenges facing schools, facing vulnerable students, we understand that across districts, we believe across districts and space that bright spots are available, that there are folks in spaces, there are institutions, there are organizations, there are educators doing impactful work that oftentimes makes all the difference within some of our students' experiences. And so we want to leverage those things. Again, understanding that these exceptions should not be the rule, and we should not get too comfortable, and we should not be too assuaged by the fact that these bright spots are here, but rather we should be doing what we can to learn from these promising models and kind of uplift and bolster some of the outcomes that should be replicable. Understand that we, again, need to respect the innovativeness and professional skill set of our educators. Our students spend a majority of their time with their teachers, a majority of their time at schools, and we need to understand that teachers need to have the agency and support and allowance to employ their skill set, their knowledge, to really, again, practice these responsive forms of teaching and care. And then finally, again, as we mentioned, the narratives, insights, and wisdoms of our student participants are a cornerstone and a centerpiece of our project. And so as young folks, again, navigating schooling system, they are most well-positioned to evaluate what is working and what is not. And so we like to understand and acknowledge that the importance of student voice cannot and should not be overstated. Thank you all. So that was our overview of our major findings, our recommendations, and then a quick wrap up about how our bright spots, again, serves to really illuminate effective practices for Black students to support these cultures of excellence, but also draw attention to some of our major critiques around common schooling conditions that we still need to be engaging with. With that being said, I'm going to transition over to Dr. Jamal Williams, who will be representing the Los Angeles County Office of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Dumas, for the introduction. Alumni of the King Drew Magnet High School of Medicine and Science. Thank you for introducing us to this new research. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. And to talk about the work that we're engaging in at the Los Angeles County Office of Education to help districts, LEA support African-American learners. And so I just want to thank our superintendent, our cabinet, our leaders, Dr. Duardo, for supporting us to engage in this work. And I want to thank UCLA for your research, because this really has served as the foundation for the supporting the African American learner trainer series that we have offered the last 2 years. And so just for a couple of thanks, I know that you thanked a lot of people, Dr. Dumas. I also want to thank Dr. Catherine Edwards, who is our lead author for the Supporting the African American Learner publication. I want to thank Dr. Stanley Johnson, also from UCLA, who was also an author there. And then Dr. Joseph Bishop, who I see on the call, Dr. Angela James, Dr. Pedro Noguera, who played a role in reviewing the document and making sure we were getting our things right before we try to support districts with it. So I mentioned we have this document. It's called Supporting the African American Learner. It was really we used the English learner roadmap as we designed the document, and it's meant to be something that LEAs, that teachers, that site leaders, that district leaders can use to try to put the rubber to the road and implement some of these best practices that we heard about in the first 2 Beyond the Schoolhouse reports, because they served as kind of the evidence and some of the stuff we brought forward. So here we are in our 2nd year of training using the research from the first 2 Beyond the Schoolhouse reports, along with the additional research we did for the publication. And we've partnered with 21st Century Leadership Academy. And so that's been able to help us scale it and spread it to 6 counties within the state. We are working to get the word out that, not that people don't feel this way, but that we really feel this way. Our African American learners matter, and we need to be doing something to support them. It needs to be in the LCAP. We need to make sure that we're creating this sense of urgency. And we have had a lot, and I see even on our call today, people that have engaged in the training. So a little bit about that training. We took the document and then we wanted to make it, very accessible for a teacher, a busy principal, to put some of the key principles into work at the school. So we this year we partnered, as I said, with the 21st Century Leadership Academy so that we could spread it throughout the state. We're using a trainer model. So we have about 6 hours of training. There were 3 in-person synchronous trainings that people attended. We walked them through some of the key findings. And for us, there are 4 principles. The first one is starting with belief systems. So we believe in this kind of inside-out approach that our educators, many of them who don't look like our students or don't have a different culture, need to really understand their own identity and begin to understand the identity of our students so that they can better serve them. So we have a training on exploring belief systems. We want our learners to be able to bring an asset-based approach to the work. And so that's part of the first principle that we talk about. The second principle is taking a systems approach to the work. So we don't want to have just a one-off solution where we have this rock star teacher in the classroom is doing a lot of great things, but we want to look at it from a systemic level. And so that includes things like grades, grading systems. It includes, really ingraining this culture of excellence into your school. Another big piece of the training is culturally responsive teaching and learning, which I know is also part of your new Bright Spots report that we provide training for. And so the participants, and then the final principle is kind of mitigating the accumulation of disadvantage that was brought up in a previous Beyond the Schoolhouse report, and it's kind of similar to what you all were speaking of today with the many challenges that some of our students have to overcome as part of their learning journey. Now, what we do is we provide training to our educators, and then following the training, we give them the PowerPoint deck, we give them the presenter notes, we give them all of the resources, the videos, so that they can go back into their school communities and duplicate this training and really try to make progress in this movement to better support our African American learners. And I'm happy to say that last week, I had the privilege of having Mr. Reggie Brookins, the principal of King Drew Magnet High School of Medicine and Science, and Dr. Kimi Mustafa, the director of the Watts Learning Center, on a panel, and they got to talk to our educators, the ones who have gone through the training with us, about what they're doing at their schools, because they were identified in the last Beyond the Schoolhouse report as being sites that were having excellent outcomes for students. And so I think some of the things they left us with that I just want to put into the space here, and I know that Stacy and Lauren are going to give you a lot more, so I don't want to take up much more time so we can get to this panel. And you all might hear from me next year, because I want to bring educators on tours of these schools so we can really get in there and behind the curtain and see the culture and see it in action. So hopefully that won't be too disruptive, but you can expect to hear from me on that. But the key takeaways from last week and hearing from the principals of these high performing schools were the power of relationships, right? And cultural proficiency plays a big role in being able to develop those authentic relationships, high expectations, community partnerships, and a culture of excellence. And so I think these are things that you're going to hear more about today, but I wanted to lift those up from these two awesome school leaders that gave their time to be with us last week. So that is where I will leave it, because I want to get to the good part just like everyone else. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for being here and for wanting to help support African-American learners.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you also for reminding me to introduce that the work done at Watts Learning Center and at King Drew High School are also inform the bright spots analysis of this report. So though those folks are not on this call, I thank you for representing their insights through your presentation. You know, it is really, really my pleasure to more deeply introduce the panelists and myself, for that matter. I'm Dr. Angela James. I am a product of public schools in LA County. I am a parent of 3 children, all of whom attended public schools in LA County, or are attending. Actually, I have a current student attending schools in LA County. And so the topic of Black student success and the role of educational organizations is dear to my heart. I also have a long time been an activist in the city, social activist and community activist, and have worked with community organizations, including those that are amongst the bright spots. We have on our panel representatives from Community Coalition, and included in bright spots are Social Justice Learning Institute as well. Though these are organizations that do phenomenal work, and they are not automatically connected with educational institutions or webinars of this sort. And so I'm really, really pleased to have the organization that is able to be with us today as a part of the panel, and encourage us to think about the study's findings, and as well my experience of the pivotal role of empowering young people to be engaged in the things that matter to them most and in their community, as a kind of, you know, it's circular. I mean, it's a way of encouraging them educationally, and their educational success and empowerment encourages their deeper involvement in the community. So I'm really happy to have 2 members of Community Coalition as a part of the panel. First, I'd like to introduce Benjamin Kazar and also Jathan Melendez. Both are representatives of Community Coalition. I also have deep personal connection to the school representatives. As we mentioned, there are bright spots that are not around the table with us, virtual table today, but that are nonetheless involved. But we do have today Lauren Carr and Stacy Joy of Baldwin Hills Avenue Elementary. Now, this elementary school is very, very special to me. My nephews are alum of the school, and both of them wonderful young men who deeply, deeply benefited. One's an engineer, both went on, graduated high school and matriculated college. Wonderful foundations that they received at Baldwin Hills Elementary School. So my experience with these organizations and with these schools are of, just the top of the top. And I am happy to welcome you to the panel. So with that, I'd like to start just by kind of throwing out a few questions. Let me start by talking with and Jathan or Benjamin, whichever of you would like to answer. Can you talk about how integral the issue of school support and academic support is for the organizing work that you do at Community Coalition?
Yeah, definitely. So with Community Coalition, we work for the South Central Youth Empowered Through Action program, which is a youth leadership development program in Community Coalition. And our ultimate goal is to expand our reach into various high schools throughout South LA. So some of our core schools are like Manual Arts High School, Crenshaw High School, Fremont, Washington Prep, and Hawkins High School as well. So our goal is to really work with the schools to make sure that we're prioritizing the needs of the students. And we also develop leadership spaces where the students really go through the process of learning how to advocate for themselves and grab a hold of the resources that they want to see in their schools and communities. So that's like the core of our work, and that's super important. So when we think about like the Black Student Achievement Program and what that looks like, we want for our students to be able to speak up and demand the resources like that for their schools.
Dr. James, you're muted.
You're mute, yeah.
I'm really curious about this issue of empowerment. Benjamin, can you talk a bit about the issue of empowerment and how that connects with academic success?
Yeah, for sure. So I think about how a lot of times we kind of will discuss issues, and I'm sure y'all see this too, about students hardly ever taking their experience or their voice into that discussion. And so what we do is, like Jathan said, we're at all these school sites. We meet with the students regularly about like, what are the issues? And obviously one at the school site that comes up, obviously, is like how they feel like the school is often failing them.
Mhm.
So then we kind of walk them through like, okay, like we do something like power mapping, helping them to be able to decide like who's making what decisions on their behalf. Then therefore, what spaces can students then organize to be at to ensure that the student body is representative in that decision-making process, ultimately to impact change at the school site. So whether that's just meeting with the principal about something small, like getting more toilet paper in the bathrooms, or it could be something larger that happens actually at like LAUSD headquarters, something that's larger, like more equitable funding, so that schools have the all their A through Gs, so that there's less substitutes. So walking them through those like political ed sessions with them that we do weekly, both at the school site and then here at COCO in person now that the COVID regulations have kind of loosened, so that young people feel empowered to know like who's making decisions, where they have to be, so they can organize to make change on their own behalf.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we may have more questions, but Jill, I'm sorry, didn't want to interrupt you, Jathan.
No, I was just gonna add a small piece. I appreciate that. Just around the importance for the youth to be able to sit at the table when it comes to these decision-making processes. So, for example, we had the superintendent of LAUSD come into our building, and we had students have the opportunity to sit down with Superintendent Carvalho and just talk through what they want to see for their schools in the community. And then also, when it comes to like the steering committee for BSAP, we have students that are Say Yeah You here at Community Coalition that are able to speak to like how they're feeling about the BSAP program, what they would like to see as far as like development for BSAP, things like that. It's super important. So I just wanted to stress that.
Thank you for that. And I just must say, there's a lot of things that people talk about young people, oh, they don't care about this or they don't care about that. When you walk into Community Coalition, you see the lie of those sentiments. Young people care deeply, and they're very passionate, and they are quite articulate in the context. And so just walking through the building and seeing people engaged in planning, in plotting, in learning together is just such a joy. Someone brought up the issue of COVID, and we are still in the midst of a pandemic and have been through quite traumatic times. In the newspaper, we hear all the time, learning loss, and all of this. One of the pivotal things about our Bright Spots has been the issue of holistic support. So I'd like to ask those of you that are educators from Baldwin Hills Elementary, if you could just talk about holistic support and how that has been accomplished at Baldwin in the face of COVID and in general. Whoever would like could answer that question.
Lauren, I'll go first.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So I think for our school, it's been many years that we've had restorative justice practices and community circles. And through the pandemic, I know that it was really important for us to check in with our students on a regular basis. That came in the form of digital check-ins with possibly doing a quick survey form to find out how our scholars were feeling, doing peer deck activities where they could collaborate and see real-time responses to different questions. And it just felt like over the past couple of years, like you said, we're still in the pandemic. Those check-ins are even more important now. We haven't seen and haven't studied and found out the data that tells us what's the effect that we've been exposed to in a pandemic. We don't know what that looks like. So we're still navigating this unfamiliar terrain, so to speak. And I think that it's really prevalent now in our school in particular for us to do these daily check-ins.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll let Lauren respond to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so like Stacey said, the check-ins with the little ones, I teach first grade, and so just lessons on managing your emotions, how to deal with I'm speaking like I'm teaching to the little ones, but a big emotion. And so being able to give them the tools and language to be able to articulate that, to say how I'm feeling and what that means for them. And so checking in with students, checking with families, providing resources for families on how to support students and support them during this during a challenging time. I think it's so important. And I think giving the kids the tools to do that, it's so important, and making sure that they feel like they're in school a big part of the day. And so for them to come to class and feel safe and feel heard and feel validated and know that they can express themselves, and that this is a space where they're going to feel loved and feel safe. And so I think that's so important, especially amidst everything that's going on.
It really is. And I want to just, spend a moment here saying to the audience, you have in front of you people that care so deeply about students. And I want to say to those on the panel, you may have no idea how deep the imprint of your care and your holistic care is on those students. Ms. Joy is a teacher who wasn't even the primary teacher of one of my nephews, who, when I said, Ms. Joy remembered you, it absolutely brightened. It made them feel important and regarded. And so I just want to say it is unbelievably important to have people actually care, not just the lessons that they impart, but the idea that people care and remember and recall, and they are a part of your community. Let me ask another question. As a teacher, and this is directed to Art Baldwin group. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have or are encountering as you seek to kind of provide this holistic approach, which you are so famous for? Now you're famous, at least.
Well, unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges right now is our school is co-located by a charter. So the new LA Charter School has been on our campus for the past 7 years, and it has drained us immensely. I don't know of any other gifted magnet school that has a charter co-location. I don't know of another pilot school that has a charter co-location. We have fought, we have sent letters, we have protested, we've been in the media. We're waiting for the district to hear us and to respond to our concerns, because it's awful. We have children doing yoga in a music room. We have children that have to use the playground for music lessons. Our itinerant staff is housed in random closet spaces practically. They have no place to call home. We don't have any of the enrichment space that we need in order to service our students. We have yoga, engineering, chess, and none of those classes can take place in a proper classroom. And they expect us to grow enrollment and, in order to fill up these classrooms, but we can't draw the public's attention if we are denying the children of the experiences that they deserve, especially with enrichment.
And
So
I want to name something, there are very few schools in Los Angeles that are majority Black schools.
There you
right?
go.
And often, we will, you can't even speak it, so this is one of the very, very few. I think there are fewer than 10 elementary schools that are majority Black schools, and this is one of them. And some of them are facing, closures. We've heard about the, cases in Oakland and in Inglewood, certainly. And so this is a school that is doing very well, in terms of just our traditional understanding. So it's really disheartening to learn that some of the very things that we are highlighting in this report, this holistic care, and some of, the way that you demonstrate to kids that there's a whole world,
Right.
and they are whole people, and we're concerned with all of those, that it is more difficult to exercise that. So I'm really, really glad you raised those issues and allow us to continue to highlight that the very things that we're talking about, the ability to have music and have yoga and think deeply and be able to navigate scary times such as what we are in, but even in regular times, there are kind of structural disadvantages that our students grapple with that are not as pervasive at some of those other magnet schools. And yet to be challenged from within by this co-location is very serious. So thank you for sharing that with us. And this question goes to anybody on the panel. Can you talk about what you hear from students? What is your best memory about students making a connection, perhaps for the first time, or changing course, that you'd like to share with the audience?
I can kick us off with that one. It's difficult for me to collectivize everything that we hear, because we hear a number of things so often, but I think one of the things that stand out to me the most is how much youth want to feel supported. They want to feel loved, especially when it comes to their school campuses. They want to I would say, work alongside adults that's on their campuses that really serve as a mentor to them, or like someone that can really guide them in the right direction. They want to be able to relate to the folks that are running their school campuses. That really helps them feel empowered, and they want to be held close. And so for us as a community organization, giving them a second home here in their community and letting them know that it's possible to achieve anything that they want to achieve is it builds all the empowerment in the world for them. And so for me, I was actually a youth in the program that I work for now, and I graduated from Mayor Arts High School. So I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for programs like, say, like Community Coalition. And so I know firsthand what kind of impact the work that I do serves for the youth in the community. And so yeah, so I love to be in a space like this, and I love to hear from other folks that are doing great work in the community. And we just need to hold our youth closer to us and make them feel a little bit more empowered.
Thank you for that, Jathan. I didn't know that you were an alum of the very program you're working for. And I can attest to just the wonderful work, preparatory work as someone that has taught you at the college level. So fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. I want to, while we're waiting, people are like, well, I don't know what I have to say. But, I invite folks to think about the ways in which community organizations and schools can continue to support one another. Particularly, we are talking about engagement with Black students who are numerically not small necessarily, but proportionally small. So it's difficult to find ways to focus on the particular group in question. And so I really, really love the work of all the organizations and schools we have. In many cases, it may be somewhat different. In some cases, like Community Coalition, members are Black and brown, almost primarily. There may be a few others, and as well, Baldwin Elementary certainly has a number of Latinx students and enormous diversity in terms of Black students. Sometimes we forget that there are Black students who were born in Los Angeles, right around, or Black students who were born in Belize or in Ethiopia or any number of places. And when I walk the campus of all of the Bright Spots, I noticed the incredible diversity of Black experiences and the engagement with those diverse experience of Black students as well as Latinx students on those campuses. Can anyone talk about just, how they navigate the terrain for Black students, with Black students, and engagement with other students as well? I have better luck when I say, Benjamin, you want to talk about that a little bit? Just the engagement across race, ethnicity, nationality, what works best?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm hoping somebody could answer it. What works best? I don't know. I feel like what's worked for us has been just that it's a lot of the work that Coco does is place-based. So it's like we all live in South Central, even though, maybe where we come from and how we experience the same community feels very different. We can talk about those, as opposed to kind of trying to erase that and just stay unified around just the place. So I think kind of highlighting our differences as opposed to trying to tie them into we all live here, we all go to school here, I think has been, I've seen the impact it's had on young people, because I don't think that those conversations happen often, whether that's just like the way that we're separated systematically, like on the west side, east side, certain neighborhoods, whether that's just like neighborhood politics and how that shows up and how youth relate to each other. So just being very intentional about, like, in SEA, it's about Black and brown coming together, but that's not to say that Black and brown are the exact same. So let's talk about our differences. Let's put those in the front. Let's have that conversation that needs to happen first before we can talk about how do we build a better South Central for Black youth, for brown youth, schools for Black youth, for brown youth, and then schools when we're all together. So that's kind of what I've seen. I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's
Absolutely.
we try to do.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm trying to paint a picture for the audience that is very evident when you walk into the building. And similarly, at Baldwin Hills Elementary, you know, there is a vibrant culture of engagement. You can't miss the books and the pictures and the posters that are on the wall and the way that that engages. And so I'm just inviting both of you or either of you to just talk about just how you engage with the diversity on your campuses.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, no, please.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so like I said, I teach first. So when you mentioned, Angela, when you mentioned books, I think that's a great entryway for little ones to kind of understand big topics. And so I read all types of books to my students, and books that reflect their cultures, books that are culture, well, every culture in the classrooms book there. I have books that reflect them, and so that they can see themselves in books, see others in books, make connections to other people that they know through the books. And so I think that's so important. Also, like for identity, I think identity is a big part of it, recognizing who you are and being very proud of yourself and knowing where you come from and your background. And therefore you can make connections to people because you know who you are. And you can also not let someone like put you down because you know who you are. And so I think that's so important. And I think that's the foundation of like of what we do in first grade. It's just, just recognizing themselves and seeing themselves in the world so they can make change later on down the line. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone on the panel for your participation today. I know for some of you, you're in your school day, so you're probably taking your little lunch. That's too short. I appreciate your investment in us and in our children. I would like to, are there questions from the audience? I want to take the opportunity to engage those if there are questions in the question answer box.
Yes, we do. It seems Dr. Bishop is going to answer our first question, who's come from, sorry, I can't see the name, but the initials are CH. Ask, within the recommendations, does the report lay out the role colleges of education, for example, UCLA, play in developing educators to be culturally responsive? So Dr. Bishop, if you're on the call, did you want to take this one?
No, go ahead, Dr. Dumas, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. So our particular report is situated within the K through 12 space. And so while we do leverage literature that speaks about college preparation, there is no direct discussion within the realm of higher education. Particularly our bright spots are really within the domain of K through high school education.
Although I must add that one of the things that I noticed as I walked the various campuses was how many students from UCLA's teacher education program were there. No doubt there were a number of teachers from other schools in the local area and elsewhere that I just, those stood out to me. But I do think that it is incredibly important that we prepare our students that will be teachers to be concerned specifically around these roles and these needs. And so engaging directly as we prepare educators to become teachers, that they will no doubt encounter students who have needs that are different than their own or similar as their own, and how to navigate that terrain is incredibly important. So I know that the work that we do at UCLA is great. And I think in another webinar context, perhaps we can dig a little deeper in terms of what kind of preparatory actions are most important. But I just want to acknowledge how important that kind of preparation is for creating teachers that are better able to successfully navigate diverse circumstance of their students. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. James. We do. Two actually from Janet Kelly. First is, what are some examples of effective or impactful community partnerships? Were there any findings or reflections as it relates to such things as housing insecurity or child welfare or justice impacted Black youth academic achievement?
Mhm. We did not have specific findings in this report. However, absolutely, one of the things that when we talk about holistic care, that what we mean by that specifically is the connection with kind of social emotional work. And I think we got an example from one of the panelists as they talked about, restorative justice and what that means, the kind of circles. But it is also the case that some of our students grapple with enormous structural impediments. And I think that within the schools, the kind of connections with community organizations are critical. And I want to just shout out Community Coalition, because basically engaging young people in, finding the solutions is incredibly empowering, and does the work of both enhancing their academics as well as their efficacy as organizers. And by that, I mean, the people that are closest to the problems are also closest to the solutions. And so, engaging directly, not pretending you have an answer, but, let's co-create this thing that we want to live in, this place we want to live in. Encouraging the work that Community Coalition talked about, encouraging people to, well, what are, your concerns and how best to organize on your campuses to meet those concerns is really, really pivotal work. And so certainly we've seen that in a number of contexts. We have another project at CTS where we look at school policing, and that's one obvious place. But yeah, I think that one of the hallmarks of the bright spots themselves is that the very act of engaging students on questions and concerns that are close to them. And those aren't trivial concerns. These are real life concerns that impact our communities, that very engagement enhances their academic success.
Now, I also just want to reiterate our shameless plug for topics of housing insecurity, Black youth, youth of color impacted by homelessness, youth impacted by institutions of incarceration, are also topics explored in other CTS projects. So, like, explore directly. So we do have that inquiry and those examinations. It's not maybe not especially examined in this particular report, but CTS has done work to address those topics as well.
And then lastly, I know we're in the last couple of minutes, how can we protect schools like Baldwin Hills, where they are facing gentrification and anti-Blackness, which leads to the abandonment of the local public school, and also facing co-location, where charter organizers participate in the academic and social oppression of predominantly Black student body? That is a really great question, and I just invite you to co-discover with us the solution to it. I think, certainly we have to lift up the stories of schools like Baldwin Hills Elementary that are doing great, great work. And we also have to make it uncomfortable. This is where the community organizers come in. Maybe we need to, connect Coco more deeply with Baldwin Hills Elementary right now. But, we have to let folks that make policy decisions know that this place is important to us. This place is doing work that we need more of, not less of. We should not be placing additional impediments in the pathway of schools like Baldwin Hills Elementary. And so I'm thinking, I feel the synergy of this virtual circle. And so everybody within my earshot needs to get involved with this, that particular question for Baldwin Hills Elementary and wherever it exists. But the point is, people don't just they look at numbers and bodies and seats and enrollment. And I think both the enrollment challenges, it increases when the word gets out about how good and solid the school is. But those are also demographics, right? If you're a place where, the population is aging, that declines. But that's also the case for Palisades and folks bus in there, you know, there's an aged population and people somehow make it there. So we have to figure it out, and we have to make sure that we communicate to policymakers that it's not okay to put additional impediments in front of people as they do this work. So I just would encourage the direct engagement in organizations like COCO or other community organizations directly with the school itself. I'm sure there's organizations on the campus that you can become aware of, but our communities have to value our children. They have to value Black children's education. And there, you know, people can say what they say, but, you know, where's the proof is in the pudding. And so we have to, as a community, ensure that the actions of policymakers align with the values that we all espouse. Well, with that, I want to thank everyone for their participation in this webinar in whatever form. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Thank you especially for teachers that interrupted their school day and shared their time with us. And thank you for everyone, the bright spots that are here on the call, as well as those that participated in the study and allowed us onto their campuses to learn more and to highlight their exciting and successful practices with Black students and I really, really thank the authors for, including myself, but really I want to thank our research team, which was filled with phenomenal folks that did just fantastic work in highlighting what's important for Black students. And I hope this has been informative to the audience. Thank you again for joining us.
Hey, Dr. James. There was one question just around when we meet. You can find us in the office weekly, but we have our entire meetings Thursday after school, so usually between 4 and 7 p.m. And if you'd like to contact us, cocosouthla.org, you can find our emails and contact information. So feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. And if it's important to us, we collectively can make sure that it's important to all of us, and we can put ourselves on. We are in control of setting the agenda of what's important to us, and so that we co-create with our young people. And I'm so encouraged when I see the work that's being done with and on behalf of our young people. Thanks again for joining us on this call.